The House of Representatives is set to vote on a resolution regarding the committee assignments for conspiracy theorist and freshman Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene, a right winger who has basically called for the execution of House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, who has called mass shootings in schools, false flag operations, and who has been supportive of messages advocating for violence against her political opponents. Now, the Republicans in the House were hoping that they could avoid a vote on this kind of resolution to strip her of her committee assignments, but it became pretty clear that Kevin McCarthy, the House minority leader, was unwilling to really hold her accountable for her actions. So I'll give you the example of what Steny Hoyer, for instance, had to say about this in just a minute. But first, McCarthy did meet with Marjorie Taylor Greene on Tuesday. And here's what we know. During the 2-hour meeting Tuesday night with Greene, McCarthy explained Democrats are threatening to force a vote to remove her from her committees. McCarthy said he would speak with House Majority Leader Steny Hoyer to try to broker a deal. McCarthy would offer to remove Greene from one committee, Education and Labor, if Democrats back off a House floor vote to remove her from both. Keep in mind that Greene is also, unfortunately, sitting on the Budget Committee in the House of Representatives as well. Now, none of that seemed to work. Taylor Greene refuses to take any responsibility for her past statements. In fact, she has been defiant and has doubled down on her past statements as a way to fundraise. And so the Democrats have decided to move forward. Why don't we skip ahead to what we know about Steny Hoyer right now? So in a tweet, Marjorie Taylor Greene, was again incredibly defiant about everything. And then Hoyer evidently rejected a deal from McCarthy, which would have avoided a floor vote on the House. Now, on the House floor, the House will vote Thursday on a resolution to strip Marjorie Taylor Greene of her committee assignments. And again, that's according to Majority Leader Steny Hoyer. As of now, the House is all set to vote. It's gonna happen. And I wanna read this tweet from Steny Hoyer where he says that I spoke with Leader McCarthy this morning, and it is clear there's no alternative to holding a floor vote on the resolution to remove Representative Greene from her committee assignments. The Rules Committee will meet this afternoon and the House will vote on the resolution tomorrow. So John, there was this effort to possibly boot her from the House of Representatives. Now it appears that most of the focus is on the committee assignments. What do you think about this tactic?
I will say overall in the situation, I think that it's pretty crazy that we went from, Katie Hill willingly resigned because we found out that she had an affair, and there apparently is nothing you can say or threaten that will take you out of Congress now. A lot has changed in the past couple of years. In terms of the tactic, I think I sort of get why Kevin McCarthy is doing what he's doing, because fundamentally he's not a leader. He's terrified at what's happening to his party. He has no idea how to manage the situation. He isn't strong enough to actually stand against the fact that it's being taken over by the QAnon cultists and all of that. So he tried to give her an out, and she didn't take it. And it would have been very easy. She could have given a really weak statement, and for some Democrats, maybe that would have been enough to get them to back off. But she didn't. And on the damage report, we went over a couple of different potential explanations for why she wouldn't just say, okay, I don't believe in Satanists eating babies to absorb their manna or whatever. But why do you think she wouldn't just do this sort of kind of pathetic, half-hearted apology that might save her committee assignments? Why wouldn't she do that?
I mean, she wouldn't do that because she's honestly a female version of Trump. And I think that she does have a pretty good understanding of where the Republican base stands on these types of issues and these types of statements. I mean, I think that it would be a big mistake to assume that Marjorie Taylor Greene or QAnon conspiracy theorists just happen to be a small fringe of the Republican Party. I think that they're pretty representative of Republican voters, and there's that side of it, John, but I also think there's this element of never apologize that I think proved to be very successful for Donald Trump, at least in the short term. Donald Trump never took responsibility for anything he did wrong. He constantly served as his own best PR agent by going around touting all of his successes, when in reality he failed in every regard, especially when it came to his promises to his Republican base, like building the border wall, which ended up being a complete and utter disaster. He didn't accomplish that at all, but it didn't matter. Never apologize. Tout accomplishments that you didn't actually accomplish, and the voters will support you no matter what. Among Republican voters, Trump left with a high approval rating. I'm talking about Republican voters specifically. So I think that those two elements are motivating Marjorie Taylor Greene's thinking, if there's thinking taking place in the first place.
Yeah, so then is the explanation, I get the theory about how it helps her branding. I get that. Is it that she either thinks that they're not gonna go through with it and she's gonna remain on the committees, or is she thinking that, hell, I didn't really plan on doing any work anyway. What do I wanna be on a committee for? I can still technically be a congressperson, and I'll be a martyr too. I'll have been canceled as a congressperson. Do you think that either of those is representative of her thinking, likely, assuming that she is capable of thinking?
She might try to position herself as a martyr, but I think that strategy would be far more effective if Democrats booted her from the House of Representatives, which, by the way, I'm not even entirely sure they would have the ability to do that, right? Because she would have to make these types of statements in the official record. Now, she said all sorts of things on social media and during her private time that are, of course, incredibly dangerous, violent, problematic. But based on how Democrats have responded to the possibility of booting her from Congress, I think they're realizing more and more that they might not even have the ability to do that. And so, but if they successfully kicked her out of Congress and she was no longer a person in any position of power, I think that she could successfully present herself as some sort of martyr. And I think it would be the wrong strategy for Democrats, because you're giving her the opportunity to make herself out to be some sort of victim. You're providing more fodder for the faux outrage that Republicans have for cancel culture. And you're also brushing this ideology under the rug as if it's just Marjorie Taylor Greene and a few isolated incidents. It's not. Again, this is actually pretty representative of Republican voters right now.
Yeah, someone in the chat this morning said, in response to Bill Hemmer saying she's just a little kooky, they were like, no, Zooey Deschanel is kooky. Marjorie Taylor Greene is dangerous. They're not the same thing. This ain't a meet cute. This is a fascist. Yeah, part of what I'm trying to understand is, with any one of these people, to what extent is it a useful grift that they're putting on, and to what extent are they true believers? And I believe that you can learn a lot by looking in someone's eyes, not necessarily in the George W. Bush Putin way, but when I looked in Alex Jones's eyes, I knew that I was looking into the maw of hell, and I knew that that was what he really believes. With Marjorie Taylor Greene, when you watch her videotaped rants that she was putting up before she declared as a candidate, it seemed to me like this is a genuine random 40-year-old-ish blonde woman on Facebook saying crazy things. There's a lot of them, and she seemed genuinely to be one of those. Like when she's talking about like an international cable, like I feel like a grifter would know that it's cabal. Not necessarily, Dave Rubin, like ask him to pronounce Bolsonaro, and he's a very successful grifter. So there are like, but anyway, yeah, I wonder, like, because one of the, I believe she was in Sandy Hook. It might have been Parkland, but someone who lost someone in one of those shootings talked to her recently, and she said, Marjorie Greene behind closed doors said she doesn't actually believe that they were all false flags. She won't come out and say it publicly, but she said to this relative that she doesn't actually believe it. So is that opportunism? I honestly don't know.
Man, that is pretty devastating. And remember, she went after David Hogg, like literally harassing him on camera. And he witnessed his peers, his classmates get slaughtered in front of him during the Parkland shooting. And she decided it's a great idea to go ahead and harass him on camera and claimed that the shooting was nothing more than a false flag operation in an attempt to take guns away from Americans. There's absolutely horrendous behavior. And by the way, John, I mean, she has continued to double down on conspiracy theories. Let me provide two of the latest examples. She tweeted, filled with members who supported, cheered on, and funded criminal thugs who riot, burn, loot, attack police, murder, and occupy federal property. Members who sleep with our greatest enemy, marry their brother to get him in our country, lead a violent mob in neighborhoods and more. Like, so that was an attack on Ilhan Omar. Partly, it's absolutely disgusting. But when she's mentioning that violent mob that loots and attacks police, she's not talking about the Capitol rioters who did just that. She's repeating disgusting talking points about Black Lives Matter and other activists who took part in demonstrations across the country over the summer in order to do something about a very real problem we have in this country with excessive force and police brutality. And let me remind you all, for anyone who might think it's a great idea to join forces with the Boogaloo Boys in order to accomplish progressive ideals and values, keep in mind the Boogaloo Boys would go to these demonstrations and intentionally incite violence, provoke more violence in order to spark this fantasy that they have regarding a civil war. They didn't do it because they support Black Lives Matter. They did it in order to pursue their anti-government civil war. And it's just absolutely disgusting. She's not apologetic. All we can really do, John, is speculate as to what drives her. But I know that at the end of the day, that kind of rhetoric is dangerous. Her views or what she claims to believe, dangerous. And more importantly, I don't want her to have a position of power in a committee like the Education Committee, where she gets to put whatever crazy conspiratorial thought she has into actual policy and action. So I'm happy with them doing this resolution and possibly stripping her from her committee assignments. And I think this is a smart way to do it because you have a floor vote. You're holding Republicans' feet to the fire. Are you gonna support this? Are you in favor of this? Because we've seen Republican after Republican go on cable television. They're asked about what their thoughts are on Marjorie Taylor Greene, and they deflect or refuse to answer the question. With that floor vote, they gotta answer the question. Do they stand by that kind of rhetoric? I guess we're gonna see.
I don't know, on the most divisive issues of the day, some people vote present. But anyway, we'll see.
Yeah, I'm right. You're right about that.
It's super fast too. Stephen King lost his committee assignments after saying like stuff that was reprehensible. Like Stephen King is like as racist as a person could be. But I think objectively the stuff he said was less directly threatening to his coworkers than Marjorie Greene. Like that's how much we've moved in just a few years. Where Steve King, it took a very long time for them to do anything, but they did eventually do something. With Marjorie Greene, she's been in office a week, and all of those Republicans are terrified of speaking out against the movement that she represents.
Yeah, and that's why I kind of love, I can't wait to see how this floor vote goes down. And Republicans are panicking because they realize that they need to address this and they're gonna face consequences either way, right? If you do the right thing and strip Marjorie Taylor Greene of her committee assignments, well, then you need to deal with the wrath of the Trump supporters and Trump loyalists. But if you go along with Marjorie Taylor Greene and refuse to vote to strip her of her committee assignments, well, then you're enabling the kind of behavior and rhetoric that we've seen from her. So it's an interesting story, and I can't wait to see how this develops. But they are gonna hold that vote tomorrow, and we'll fill you guys in, of course, as we learn more about the story.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.